All right. So yeah, here we are. Node tooling group meeting. It is the 12th of June. It is a Friday. It's 1 p.m. where I live. The year is 2020. So this is where are my notes here? We have these. I should probably just here we go. These minutes could anybody who's here please go in there and add yourself to the list of people present. The link to the meeting notes is now in the chat here. Anyhow, the first thing is announcements, and we don't ever seem to actually do that. We like do it at the end. So I want to start. I want to do an announcement, and the announcement is, yay, Mocha released version 8, and it has support for testing in parallel, and that was a big deal, and that took a while to get done. Actually, years. People have been asking for that for years. It did take like a couple months to actually implement, but it landed. It seems to work okay. And so if you're using Mocha, go check that out. Yeah, and that was my big thing. And so I got to find something else to do now. Anybody else have any announcements?
Not really an announcement, just a reminder. We, in a previous meeting, had a talk about unifying different strategies for audit hooks and things of that nature. So there is an open issue for the Collaborator Summit. Just a heads up if people want to go watch for that as well.
Okay, yeah, that should be on the list here of agenda items, so we can follow up on that there. Anything new from NPM? Did y'all release that diff thing yet?
Yeah, I'm sure Roy wants to. It's still sitting in PR.
Yeah, it's gonna take a while, I think.
Yeah, we're getting close to NPM 7 beta though, so that's kind of nice. We're getting closer there. Potentially in a month-ish. I think we'll be there to have folks be able to play around, and there will be some nice stuff there.
Super. So if there are no other announcements, let's start with this agenda. And so the first thing,
I was gonna sorry to interject. I had one thing. Are we doing anything for the tooling group at the OpenJS? There's a collaborator summit at OpenJS World, isn't there? I think.
True.
Yeah. I don't know. Is there still time to work something in? I dropped the ball on that. I made one for Mocha, but I totally forgot to make one for this group, and so I can talk to Jory and see if she can work us in.
Yeah, I mean, I've found them useful in the past. I don't know. Maybe we should just have, even if we don't do one, maybe we could have a meeting with some of the folks in this meeting around that time if there's not one already, and just talk about. It'd be nice to look back on the last one we had and see if we actually made any progress towards any of the things we were trying to make progress towards. But yeah, I don't know. I don't feel like we need to race into OpenJS World unless anyone feels strong.
I mean, yeah, I feel like we should have a session. Just if we can have a session. I don't know why not. So let's see here. Let me add something here. Okay, so right, that first thing is this deep dive meeting proposal stuff. And you know what? Actually, I want to move that to the end because that is kind of an open-ended thing. I was actually, you know what? Never mind. So, the deep dive meeting proposal. So I made an issue, and it says, "Hey, if you have an idea for something you want to spend an entire meeting on, toss it in this issue, and we'll find something we want to work on." You know, I think it's certainly a little more interesting than just like going down this list. So if we can do a deep dive on some particular topic or some particular initiative or bug or, you know, whatever, go check out issue 73 and please put your ideas up in there. All right. So we get this FS hooks thing, which is, it's not FS hooks. It's, I don't even know what you would call it, but it's the thing that Bradley was talking about. And last time, let's see, we needed to form like a group, right? So, or have a meeting about this sort of thing. And so there's a new issue. Is that what you said? There's an issue somewhere?
On the OpenJS Collaborator Summit, there is an issue to add it to the agenda. I think it was Quard made it.
The oh, so like a session. Okay, so like a proposed session then, I guess.
Correct.
For
I can dig out the link.
I just pasted it there in chat for reference.
I don't see it.
Oh, sorry. Posted here. There.
There
Sorry.
we are. All right. So, okay. And that is pretty soon. So, I mean, I think we might have like one more meeting before then, but I don't know. I don't know if we should try to press the issue and try to meet up before then, or does anybody have any opinions, or should we just kind of like wait for this thing and start talking about it then? Anybody?
I think the big thing that we're seeing in cross work for different working groups, at least from my perspective, is people need to come with the constraints that they have, in particular if they have security constraints or robustness constraints, because those seem to be argued about. For the most part, people aren't arguing about if APIs are valid use cases. They're arguing about things like the ability for you to escape a loader for ESM or change the policy file on the fly. So these are more about like what you need from your API. So like APM vendors probably have more performance minded needs for production running than say tooling and stuff like that. So just kind of gather your thoughts on all those.
All right. Cool. So does anybody have anything else on this one?
I think that number 42 could fall under the same umbrella. Like I see that they already linked the issue for child process hooking. Maybe the detecting the process exiting could also fall under this heading, because that seems like hooking the core.
I mean, I guess it just kind of depends. It depends. Yeah, it depends on what you can do with this thing. If you can, you know, if you can muck about with stuff, sure, but I don't know. Or I mean, is if the only way is, I mean, really, because so that what I would think would you would get for 42 is just like another event on process, right? I mean, is that what you were envisioning?
Possibly. My only concern is with adding an event. The event emitter API allows for arbitrary removal, and in particular allows basically remove all. So my concern would be, for example, if NYC is testing something and some code adds their own exit handler and then just sloppily does remove all, just to remove their own without tracking it, then that could break our code. I guess that's my main issue with the event emitter, is that code that didn't add the hook can remove it.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of that's their problem though. If they want to step on NYC's toes, I mean, like, so
they even did it. It could be a dependency.
Right. Sure.
So-
I know that event emitters have an event when you add a new event, so you could add a listener that waits for new listeners and says something. And so I don't know if there's a remove event. I've never used it if it exists, but that would be interesting to like add an event that watches the other event that says, hey, you removed this thing and we need it. Don't do that. Which is fine until they remove the event that's listening for the event removal.
They inevitably would. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. because we write modules to break NYC.
There is an event for that, but an alternative might be just having a way to add a event that is not removable. You just can never remove it.
I feel like we end up with like the Z index thing in websites where you have like now a stack of 1,000 things deep on, I don't know.
It's like an arms race.
Well, if they can't remove it at all, if there's no reflection of it, I don't think it's quite the same. They simply just can't interact with what you've added. But that's kind of a big change to a hot path to allow that.
So this, we're actually kind of skipping ahead, but let me add that. Okay, so that's good to think about then. You know, if you know, maybe an event emitter isn't the right API for this. I don't know. So where are we now? So the next, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, just before we move on, I guess an alternative that I was kind of thinking is more like the async hooks API, where essentially you initialize an interface and then you enable it. And without a reference to that interface, you're not disabling it. At least that's my understanding of how it works from the documentation. So I think for for my use, and I'd assume for APMs as well, they wouldn't want other code accidentally or purposefully mucking with what they're doing. So that would work better for that reason than an event emitter, at least in my opinion.
I put a little pseudocode in the minutes there. Do you see that, Corey?
Yes.
Is that kind of what you were thinking? So you get this reference to this unsubscribe or whatever?
That would be a simple way to do it. The async hooks, I think, might be more appropriate for like FS hooks, where you have like a whole group of callbacks that you're registering. So essentially that creates a class where there's it creates an instance where there's an enable and disable function.
You know, yeah, I guess, yeah, I would like to think more about the relative merits of that versus the event emitters. Definitely. I don't know. I've used that pattern before, but I haven't like really thought about, okay, what are the disadvantages of doing it this way? What are we stopping from happening? What are we disabling that we shouldn't be disabling? And I guess that's just I'm just talking. It's a good question to ask. Okay. Next one is chmod-r. And in the last meeting, Roy and Ben will prod Darcy is what it says, but it also says there are still security concerns. So is there any updates on security concerns and or Darcy?
So me and Ben just got out of what I would consider as Ben leading me through the code base a bit, and doing a bit of work on this actually first. So that's kind of an update there. Ben, you can also shine some light on that. He's also cut a branch that I'm gonna take over with some initial work there. Just basically taking Isaac's initial implementation of Chmodder, and we would have to clean that up to actually make it like a proper proposal, write some tests for it as well. In terms of the security implications, like I know Isaac chimed in there, and Chris, I think you followed up also in the thread itself. I personally, I would say it's over my pay grade and knowledge grade to probably chime in on how to utilize or why this might be insecure, or that there might be opportunity to abuse Chmodder if we implement the recursive functionality into Chmod. I'm open to discussion there, Ben, if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't read that much into the exploit, but Isaac basically shared a couple of links and basically was pointing out that there's some timing, I guess timing based, where actually I shouldn't try to summarize a security attack I don't understand, but basically recursive chmod, there's a specific type of operating system level concern that has to do with, I think, the timing of as files are changed in permissions, how it can, I guess someone could use it as an attack point. So I don't know a ton about that. I'm not a security expert either, but knowing Isaac, I'm sure he's dug into it deeply and has valid concerns. So it becomes this question of like these security concerns versus like only having some of the API surface of the file system be recursive and having other parts not be recursive. So I don't know, it raises an interesting question. Like I would wonder, maybe someone needs to dive into a specific post that Isaac has shared and see if there's any ways to break the concern. Is there any safe way to do it? Is it safer if we No, I think part of the problem is just that file system operations can't be synchronous across multiple files, I think. So I don't know that there's, I don't know, like someone needs to dig into the security issue. And then there's the question, like if we're gonna actively choose not to make some of our file system operations recursive, I think we should call that out in documentation. Like, here's why you should be mindful. Here's why this method doesn't exist, maybe. If we're going to start adding recursive to more file system operations. What else is on my mind? Worth noting is I was looking at chmod r on npm. I mean, it's used, but it's certainly not like nearly as used in the community as like make dir recursive or remove directory recursive. And I noticed npm itself, which I would expect would have this need of changing permissions on a large number of files. I didn't notice npm relying on it, so. I guess you vendor all your dependencies though in npm though, right? Do you know if you vendor? Do you vendor
Vendor that
chmod?
guy? Let me ls that 1 sec.
Hey, quick question while you're looking that up. Is the plan for this to port that code into Node, or are you trying to like vendor the existing library?
We vendored rimraf, well, yeah. We didn't, but the contributor, and it basically just moved rimraf over into internal/fs/rimraf. So I think if we were going to start using that approach for a few more file system operations, then we could just use that as a pattern for anything that has. Because yeah, I mean, we did mcdir recursive in C, and mcdir has one special trait, which is that it has to be done serially, because you need to be creating these deep, you need to have created the higher level folder before you can create the deeper folder. For these operations where you could be doing it in parallel and like updating this permissions on 8 files at once or removing 8 files at once, it's just an absolute pain in the butt to do in C++ when Chris took a look at it. So it almost seems like maybe the vendoring should be our go-to if we are going to add recursive to more of the file system.
Yeah, I would strongly discourage attempting to do that in C++ unless there's a really compelling performance gain.
I don't know.
Like I think I said port there when you asked that, Ian, because there's some work that has to be done to take in Isaac's work. That's why I thought by that. I'm not going to write any C++.
Yeah, but it's basically where we were vendoring into that folder, and from.
It also depends if it has. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say it also depends like what kind of dependencies the package has, right? Like with rimraf, it didn't have any dependencies once we removed glob. So vendoring anything that has, I mean, even any dependencies kind of becomes a nightmare, because then you have to vendor the whole tree.
chmod r has no dependencies.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. Maybe the action item here is someone needs to deeply understand these types of attacks that Isaac has pointed us towards, and we need to decide whether it's acceptable risk or if there are known ways to circumvent these attacks before we expose the Node.js code base to them. And I think that's really fair feedback on Isaac's part.
So the only way I see to avoid that attack is to do file descriptor operations, which technically exists in Unix. I don't know if it exists in all the other operating systems, and that would be some research.
So it sounds like there's kind of like implementation wise, I think this is relatively easy, but it sounds like someone needs to take on some of this research work, because that's kind of become apparent. So who's excited to learn about file system security?
Yeah.
Not everyone put their hand up. Sorry.
I mean, is it not fair to, I mean, so number one, I don't feel like we should like not send a PR because it might be risky. But I mean, is it better to just like do it and then say, hey, security working group, what do you think of this? Because unless you know what you're talking about, you don't really know what you're talking about. And I'm going to assume that the people in the security working group know a lot more about it than it sounds like we do.
I mean, that sounds reasonable. And I mean, Isaac's other point he made was that like a strong warning that says his advice was don't do this in a production environment. But what does that mean? Like, is my CLI running in a unit test? Is that a production environment? Like, you know, to what degree? You know, and the second we add something into Node Core, there is the risk that people aren't going to immediately use it in a production environment. So if it is a really significant security concern, then like we do need to protect our users from that, right? So I don't know. Yeah, you're right. I don't see any problem with a straw person proposal, getting it to the point of polish, and then I think, but making sure that we're looping in the security group and having a conversation about it. And it might just, I think that's a good idea, and I think it might help inform us on future, if we continue this initiative of trying to move more of the operations that make sense to be recursive, making them recursive. We should definitely understand this specific category of issue, because I bet this will come up on multiple, like will come up for chmod, and chown I think has the same vulnerability, and I think it's just something we need to have on our minds.
So just just to follow up on what you were asking, Ben. So we actually vendor choner, so not chmod. That's probably why you saw that, chmodder.
So okay.
Yeah. In npm.
For like,
so
was Isaac's feedback specifically on chmod or on chown, or are they both?
It's on well, I think he had a general sentiment, but that
Okay.
issue is specifically for chmodder. And then we in npm actually don't use that dep, but use choner. So one or the
to
other.
Me,
it's
like NPM's a production environment, so NPM's chosen to make that trade-off. So I want to. Yeah, I want to understand. I don't know. I want to understand this better. I haven't had the time to learn the space.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think Isaac's main complaint is the lstat versus readdir timing. And you could do fd opendir instead of readdir and fstat instead, and it would work. I don't think fd opendir is provided by libuv currently, but it could also be that we can ship at least a PR with the current behavior and then migrate over to those two underlying APIs. So there isn't a timing window for people to exploit.
That makes sense. Would that mean we are implementing it in C++ though? It's because we would need to perform all of the ownership in a single synchronous stack of work, or what would that mean exactly?
No, it doesn't need to be done in C++, but we don't expose the proper APIs to JavaScript currently. Basically, the problem is by using a string lookup for lstat, after your lstat call, you're no longer guaranteed that the file pointed to by that string is the same when you use a string again. So instead, you can opendir it from a file descriptor and fstat it, so it's always on the same file descriptor. And that would ensure that it's always a symlink.
I understand. So okay, I understand. Is the concern that like someone swaps out the symlink and to a system critical file that now you've changed the ownership to the person who you've kind of made it so more people can access a secure file, essentially, like I don't know, system file or something?
Well, it's a symlink escape, but yes.
Okay. Yeah, I should read. I don't know what I'm talking about. So.
To be clear, is this something that libuv has that it's just not exposing to Node, or is this something in Node that we're just not exposing to JavaScript, or what?
I don't think libuv currently exposes FD opendir, but they do expose opendir, and so that would just be a very minor change for them. I don't know if Windows has the same API, but they probably do these days.
This makes sense. So yeah, it sounds like Darcy, I think you could see that pull request to like where it needs to be, which means getting it to work for promises, for synchronous, and adding unit tests. And then when we open the PR, it's just a start of a conversation about how we would address this issue. And that might mean there's a little further work to add a method to libuv, or yeah, we'll see what.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else on Chamater?
No, just to follow up there is that we'll get that in a good place and then see if we can make it even better.
If you all open that PR, please, I don't know, CC the group, at Node.js tooling, or like go into the Slack and dump a link so we can take a gander. All right. Next one is this ESM module caching thing. So there was a modules meeting some time ago, which I don't think actually happened because it conflicted with TC39. If there was a meeting, I didn't go to it and Ben didn't go to it, and it seemed like it wasn't going to happen. I did try to go to it, but nobody started the meeting. So maybe we can get to the next one. I don't know. Ben, you said something about the interns.
The only key thing is V8 cannot garbage collect ES modules once they're linked. Like it's not doable. You're gonna have to go change V8 before we can even try to support it. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, our idea is, our agenda is to come with our problems and not the solution, right? So
I'm just stating going to the modules working group is probably not going to be fruitful. You got to go higher up.
I mean, okay. So it sounded like last time you thought, yeah, come to the modules group and say, these are the problems we're trying to solve, instead of being prescriptive about solutions. But now you're like, maybe that's not such a good idea.
Well, this topic is specifically about unloading the modules. And I'm just stating, like, we can't do that. Like, that's as long as the agenda item still says unload the module, like, that's not something we can do. We could expose the cache, we could do other stuff, but like unload, like, is just not something we can do. Maybe just renaming the agenda item here would be helpful.
Yeah, okay. So we'll just, all right. I mean, in a perfect world, that's what we'd want to do, because, memory leaks. But yeah, so to avoid all right. So anyway, Ben, do you still want to try to do that? Get to that meeting?
I don't know. I think maybe we can talk offline and like carve out half an hour in one of our calendars or something and just put together a little document and see how we both feel. I think it would at least be valuable to write down all of our needs kind of in a concise way.
Yeah, they're in the issue, but I wouldn't call them concise. So, okay. And so, I mean, do you want to, so that modules meeting is next Wednesday, I think. And so do you want to try to do it before then? 5 days from now.
Yeah, I'd be up for that. I mean, the main issue that I'm just reading through again too. I mean, the main issue that I was originally trying to solve, I think, when I got interested in this problem space was the Istanbul problem and how we would like re-instrument files. And then I think that like the other really interesting one is like fakes and stuff like proxy choir and that kind of thing. So I don't know, it's a really valuable, like I think it's the sort of thing where we do need to make sure that it's possible. And to Brad's point, whether this is tooling above or something, like, I don't know, just rating down the needs of the tooling community, I think is really valuable. I have a point a little further down the list about test coverage and how the community is just noticing now that test coverage doesn't work quite as well in ESM because like it doesn't become obvious until ESM starts to get adoption. And I think we could be in a similar position with some other things like proxying. So, you know, like getting ahead of that curve and being able to tell folks how we're going to do it before it's just people complaining that they can't do it, I think is valuable.
Mm-hmm.
So just to mention, we do actually have an experimental ES loader hook that essentially works with NYC. So that'll do the live instrumentation of the code. That doesn't actually require any kind of additional features other than the experimental loader hooks from the ES module system. But the point for proxy choir and some of those other mocking tools, I think, is where this would be useful, or some solution for it would be useful.
So maybe just like centering the conversation around that, like this is the need the tooling community has. We have these, like we sometimes need to swap dependencies out last minute for unit testing. I certainly use proxy choir at work. I mean, maybe we can center the conversation around that. Might be smart. I think that sounds smart.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds fair. So, okay. Well, Ben, let's just follow up on offline and put our heads together. All right. Anything else on this one? Okay. So moving on to this this hooking thing, I feel like this one is again. It sounded, Corey. So the notes from last meeting for this one were blank. So I feel like it was like, yeah, Corey might have said something like, I'm just going to sit on this for now because of the you know, system wide mega hooks thing. And
Are
maybe,
we talking about number 48 right now?
yeah.
Yeah, so that's actually also linked in the inner WG group. Issue actually links to number 48, so it sounds like they've actually already kind of said that this should be part of it.
Okay. Does this need its own like agenda item anymore?
Ben, at one point I had suggested that we could let it go off the agenda for now, but I think you objected. How do you feel?
I don't have a strong feeling right now. I think we could remove it if no one's excited to champion it.
Well, I mean, I think it's not that we don't want to champion it. It's just that it seems to be like a part of this larger initiative.
Yeah, I think the feature, I was kind of glomming onto it, and I'm not sure if that has its own issue or if maybe it's been supplanted by other ones, was basically this idea of kind of sticky environment variables.
You mean sticky to child processes?
The child processes, yeah, like spawn and spawn sync.
That is,
I don't know where
this
that,
issue
yeah.
would accomplish that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, why don't we let it, it sounds like there's a lot of conversation happening around just hooks in general right now. Why don't we see where that conversation goes, close this one for now, and then split out some other conversations if once we know the scope of that. Instead of, I'm happy with closing it for now.
I'd rather leave the issue open, but we can remove the agenda tag if that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right, works for me. The next one is the process exiting, and we already looked at this a little bit and discussed it a little bit. Is there anything else you want to talk about there? So then, what would is there like an action item for this? Do we want to try to propose something? Oh, right, the action. Why am I? Okay, Chris still has the action item, which was to list all of the conditions in which this event should I don't know, deal with. So yeah, I still have to go through and do that, and then, but I'll do that with the idea now that it doesn't have to be, you know, another. It doesn't have to be an event emitter, right? It doesn't. We don't have to piggyback on the same API and add yet another event. Maybe there's a better way to do it. And then once I've done that, you know, maybe that's a good discussion for, you know, okay, so we have this problem and this is what we need. There's several different ways to do it. How should we do it? And try to come together there.
I was gonna just kind of share a link here. I think you could literally look at the unit tests for, this is like figuring out all the ways the program can exit. You might look at the unit test suite for signal exit. I think it enumerates all the catchable things at least. It's pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, signal, remind me, signal exit was kind of the inspiration for this, yeah?
Yeah, lots of things use it, and it's basically just, it mashes together process.exit with signal handlers.
Yeah, it's actually like for NYC anyways, signal exit's what's currently being used. It does a lot of not awesome things to the core, and it would be nice if NYC did less modification of Node.js itself.
So I don't know signal exit very well. So is it like, is it monkey patching? Like, what is it doing in there?
It basically, Isaac knows it way better than me, and it's such clever. It's very intense. It's very interesting code. I'm trying to think of it's basically it does a lot of work, I believe, to ensure that it's the last thing in a stack of handlers. So it actually like kind of swaps out handlers, makes sure it continues to put itself to the top of the handler, and then wires into all of the catchable signals in the operating system, and then fires a hook on any of those catchable signals, and also wires into process.exit. But it does a bunch of stuff around making sure that it's actually, because it's designed for unit testing frameworks, it's used by TAP. So it actually does a lot of, I'm just re-familiarizing myself with, yeah, it kind of pushes itself to the top of the signal listeners, I think. And that's less code than I thought it was. Yeah, but it basically just has a few big long lists of signal handlers that it listens to. Like it has a different list for Windows than for Linux, and it iterates over all of them, creates a listener on all of them, and then fires your callback, just like as if you'd attached a callback to process.exit.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'll take a look at that. Maybe I'll propose this as something we could deep dive on. Otherwise, like for the next meeting, I'll come back with that list of things at least.
I think it's spawn wrap I was thinking of that does like tons of operating system stuff. Like signal exit looks actually, the only weird stuff it's doing, I think, is overriding really exit, which probably users shouldn't be using. Because there's process.exit and then process.really exit that you can use. So
oh boy, I didn't know about really exit. I didn't.
There's really
know about
exit.
that.
It fires after exit. So this is the world we live in. So this is why we should probably make things better.
Oh gosh. Okay. Cool. I'm gonna move on. Is that all right? Source map stuff. Last time there was a pull request and you wanted to remove an experimental flag.
Yeah, I mean, we landed all the work around source maps working for that nice little snippet of code. I think I might have mentioned that in the last meeting.
Yes.
I haven't removed the experimental flag yet. I still intend to. And I'm giving a talk on it at OpenJS World that summarizes how you use the flag to try to get more folks knowing about it. Just sent the talk in today. Oh, and I have an outstanding PR on Mocha that's, I think, never going to land, but I appreciate the bearing with me. I don't know where it stands.
Yeah, there's probably a bunch of conflicts or something. Okay, so argument.
Sorry, I have a quick question about source maps.
Yeah.
Ben, do you think, is the intention that that's suitable for running in production?
I think it would work in production. Like, I don't think it would be a major performance hit, and the performance hits as the modules are initially loaded. So once your application's actually up and running, you shouldn't see significant increases in performance. And it doesn't hit any of the source map logic until a stack trace is actually happening, at which point it does it at the last second as the stack trace is generated. So the main reason that's behind a flag is that there's a lot of things already in the community that do work with source maps. So it felt like it could be really disruptive to just start doing it ourselves potentially. I don't know. I've been a little gun shy on moving it away from a flag.
The reason I asked, we were debating trying it at work. Like some tools, like APM type tools, let you upload source maps. So they can do the mapping for you when you send them an exception, and some don't. And so we were kind of debating, like, would it be easier to just turn this on in the service itself?
I think it would be relatively safe to turn on, try it. Know that it's mostly for stack traces, like if that's the type of telemetry you're looking to. Like we haven't applied it to things like, I don't know, like other telemetry reports we haven't applied it to except for coverage.
But it's just for stack traces, right? Because otherwise, like all we get now in those tools is the compiled code trace, which is not very helpful.
I would appreciate you trying it out and giving feedback. Use Express, right?
In some places.
No. Yeah, like I think Express overrides the prepare stack trace itself. So I think they don't conflict, but you'll be using Expresses, not nodes. But in a non-Express environment, give it a try.
Yeah, okay.
And then if performance looks good with it, maybe that can come back to this meeting and maybe we can consider making it not behind a flag. Like maybe we decide to take that on. That would probably have to be a next major version of Node though, like Node 15. But yeah, I mean, I don't see why it would be a major performance hit.
Yeah, no, it's good to know if it really is only like at module load and then when the stack trace is generated. I mean, that sounds great.
Could that potentially be a memory usage hit?
Yeah, definitely. Like you'd have a little bit more for each module with the source map. You would have loaded in, I mean, close to double the size. Like source maps end up being about the size of the code file.
Yeah, so that's something we can definitely like test, and then I can get numbers on like how much it increases our memory usage.
Yeah, cool. I'd be super excited to have you trying that out. I know I know a couple big companies are using it. Well, even Google's using it. I know another big company using it. So we've been getting okay feedback.
All right, yeah, I'll try it out. I like the note there, Chris.
Yeah. We have like 4 minutes left. Just FYI. Can I move on or anything else on this one? All right. So argument parsing, yeah, we're still supposed to meet about that. We haven't met about that, but I'm supposed to give a workshop on Mocha, and I needed some example code, and so I wrote an implementation of this. what Ben and I have had, and Roy had discussed, and it's linked there in a gist. And so it's just like a dumb little function, and that's all it does. But yeah, we should probably meet and just kind of finalize like what we what we want to do, if this is what we want to do. Is that, am I right? Is that what's going on here?
Yeah, let's get those. Like, I'd love to get those meetings moving because I think this could be really. I think this actually would be a really valuable feature. Not that the other stuff we're doing isn't, but this I think would be really impactful. Okay, so who should make the meeting? I'm going to give that to you, Ben. All right, I will make the meeting. I will take it on.
Nice.
Okay. We have two minutes. There's something about code coverage feedback, which is a link to a Michael Rogers tweet, and he says that it sucks. So
yes, yeah, that's the feedback I've gotten. I don't think it sucks, but it's certainly not as good as Istanbul. And Corey's been saying this for months, and I've known it indefinitely. It's just that like the V8's implemented differently, and Istanbul is a little more accurate. So it's cool. It's exciting to hear that Corey will have it working with VSM soon. I think that's great. But I have been trying to push on the V8 folks a little bit as well to see if we can close some of the deltas, because it is, some people are relying on it now that ESM is unflagged. So yeah, I don't know there's any real action item there. Just I don't know if anyone's excited about this space, that I'd happily take some help. I would be, I don't know, I would like to understand like more about like how it is inferior to Istanbul or whatever in terms of accuracy. I mean, I don't think there's anything I can do about that. It sounds, is that a V8, something the V8 team needs to address, right? Yeah. No, it's kind of, I mean, we're out of time, but it indicates an interesting thing. Like when we rely on V8 features, sometimes it does mean turnarounds a little longer into Node. So what does that mean for the tooling group? We're thinking about. All right, so our time is up, but one last thing is that, so I'm going to go and see if we can get a session at the Collab Summit, which is again, a virtual conference thing. It's just kind of sprinkled around. I don't know, like OpenJS World, it happens, part of it happens at the same time or something. So I'm gonna see if we can get a session. And if we get a session, then I will post an issue or otherwise alert people to that. But I do have, where's my calendar? So our next meeting actually falls probably on or around then. And it may be that the session itself may be this meeting or something weird like that. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But anyway, thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good weekend.